How do we play arpeggios? I actually more or less covered this in another tutorial a few weeks ago, and I was discussing it with a student afterwards and realized that this is probably a topic that I should address in its own video. This is going to be a really quick walkthrough. It's actually not that complicated, but we don't always learn how to practice arpeggios in an effective way. So what happens a lot is we buy a book that has all of our scales and all of our arpeggios and the chords and whatever with all of the fingerings. And if you're a better trained student than I ever was, then you take those and you go and you practice them on a regular basis. But remember, so much of what we do with the piano is not just the what, it's not just the notes and the fingerings, it's also the how that is so essential. And there's a common issue with arpeggios that gets overlooked. So let's take A major, the one I was just playing at the beginning of the video, and let's have a look at what's going on and the mistake that most students make when they start practicing arpeggios. So we look at our sheet music, if you're using sheet music, and it's written out. We have A, C sharp, E, A. And if you're going to play more than one octave, then your fingering is going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 5, and then you go back down the same way you went up. What often gets lost in translation is due to how we practice our scales actually. So if we look at the A major 2-octave scale, we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you go back down. Again, the same way you went up. So when we play our scales, we play the first 3 fingers and then we cross under. Get to the 4th finger, cross under, turnaround point. Then you cross over again. And this also works in a much faster tempo. It works well in a much faster tempo. No issues. And I don't know if you've caught what the problem is yet. What happens is when we cross under in our scales, it's a very active movement from the finger, and we're still kind of in the process of letting go of this one while we go on to the next one. And it works because the notes are close together. It doesn't, even in a fast tempo, it's not stressful for the hand, it's not stressful for the fingers because it's not a far distance. It's all right there next door. But when we move on to arpeggios, we try to emulate that same movement without stopping to think that it's not going to work for us, because in 1 octave it's fine. We can do 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 2, 1. You can even just kind of block it out and play just with your fingers, which I don't advise, but you could theoretically. You could maybe even do it fairly evenly that way. However, once we want to go past 1 octave and we want to get over to this A with this thumb, if we don't let go of our 3rd finger before we do it, our elbow is gonna fly up, we move our entire arm, and if you do this in really slow motion, you'll realize that is extremely uncomfortable. This is incredibly uncomfortable what I'm doing right now. And it's also extremely inefficient. Try to do that in a fast tempo. It's very uneven, it's not nice, it doesn't feel nice, it doesn't sound nice. So then what do we do? Well, the good news is we actually kind of get to cheat. My brother had a cross-country coach, and he always said, if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. Which, how you're supposed to cheat in cross-country, who knows? Everybody had a good laugh about it. But here, it actually applies. If you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. If you're going to be playing slowly, there's no problem with that fingering, there's no problem with that style of playing. You can really just make it very legato, and you can do that. Sometimes we call it finger pedal. It sounds so connected, it sounds like the pedal's down. You can do that finger pedal and keep it nice and smooth and even and not have any problems. But once you try to go faster, it's going to trip you up. It's not a way of playing that's going to be feasible in a faster tempo. So what on earth does cheating look like at the piano? Well, for starters, you're just going to play everything staccato. And I really want you to intentionally play single notes, and I want you, for now, to just hop finger to finger and make sure that you're really intentionally letting go of every note in between. And once you speed that up, it's not going to sound staccato, it's going to sound legato. And if you want me to prove it to you, put the pedal down and do the same thing. None of that sounded staccato. And then if you start to go faster, now notice, when you start to go faster, you're not going to do this very intentional release and move to the next note. There's no time for that. Everything's going to be sped up, and you're going to also have a bit more movement in your wrist than you maybe would with the individual notes. And there's also a bit of, you add kind of a curve when you turn back around, and if you're going to be going in circles, you're just going to keep curving like that. And that, honest to goodness, is really all there is to it. What we do not want is creating this claw-like position with the hand, and you don't want these really exaggerated cross-unders and crossovers. Your elbow should remain more or less quiet at your side. It's going to be flexible. What we don't want to see are chicken wings. Nobody's doing the chicken dance. You're not poking out your elbows every time you cross under. And you notice, even without the pedal, it sounds crisp, it sounds clean, but it doesn't sound staccato. It doesn't sound, there's not a lot of space in between the notes. Now, I'm aware that you're not going to go from playing really slowly to playing really quickly overnight. That's just not feasible, that's not realistic, and I don't want you to set yourself up for expectations that you're not going to be able to fulfill. So then how do you practice this? Honestly, probably the best way you can practice it is with metronome. If you're starting with 2 octaves, you're probably going to be playing triplets for each click. So something like 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1. Once you advance to 4 octaves, you might want to switch over to practicing them in 16th notes, because then it also prevents these accents on the tonic every single time. So for example, instead of not necessarily very pretty, then you start to play something a bit more rounded. So 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E. For example, it helps offset those accents a little bit. You're still accenting rhythmically, you still know exactly where your main beats are, but then the sound doesn't end up as pointed and as square somehow. But really, it just all comes back to the basics. Stick to 1 octave for as long as you need to. So really get used to letting go and moving between the notes. Get used to the idea of the wrist being flexible, making sort of a circle every time you play that 1 octave. And once you're ready to move on, you'd hop over with your thumb. You're not going to be doing this dramatic cross under. You just hop. You release the 3rd finger, and as you release, you float over. Going back is a little bit trickier, but the key is the arm is always moving and supporting everything, and if your fingers are really truly supported, you're going to be able to master this pattern. If you want a few more tips, do refer back to that other video that I mentioned. There's a link in the description below so that you can find it without any issues. And if you have any remaining questions, let me know in the comments, send me an email, and I'll make sure that we get you sorted out. As always, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. I admire so much your efforts to learn and to master this beautiful instrument, and I'm cheering for you all the way. Until next time, happy practicing. One more thing before I let you go. If you're watching this video on the day it's published, tomorrow, January 11th, 2025, I am hosting a workshop. It's all about how to plan out your practicing for this entire year, how to set your long-term goals, how to turn those into manageable chunks, and really how to design every single practice session of the entire year with your goals in mind and where you're headed. If you're interested, there is a link in the description below, and I would love to see you there.